the Attorney General representing the President, the Justice of the Court of Appeal, Constitutional Court, our keynote speaker today, Your Lordship Justice Egonda Ntende, the Honorable Minister Kahindo Otafire, senior citizen, who is in our midst here, the President, Uganda Law Society, Deputy, and all members of the Council, my colleagues in political leadership, the family of Njuba, all of you, the stakeholders, members of the Radical New Bar, ladies and gentlemen, I salute you all in your respective capacities. And we thank the Lord for this moment and for you, the commitment you have made to reminisce on the instructive life and legacy of Sam Njuba. We thank you, the leadership of the ULS. We thank you, the family. We thank you, all of you, the stakeholders, including our elder here, Mzee Matthew Kikiri, for all the information we have shared this morning. It's vital, it's important, and I think we have done justice to our foreign hero. I thank you very much. Having said that, my talk will specifically focus on one dimension, Njuba, the legal activist. All has been said, but that aspect is critical, and it's more relevant when we talk about the role of the Radical New Bar in the context of the political challenges we are confronting with, and actually legal challenges. It's vital, it's important. When you look at the life of Njuba, it was nothing else but activism. As a lawyer, he was a legal activist. As a judicial officer, he espoused judicial activism. And as also a serving political leader, he did the same. In those three aspects, I'll first speak about the Njuba of the 70s and the legal activism, because that is the time when he assumed the leadership of Uganda Law Society. Many have spoken about Njuba being the president in 1978, but prior to that, he was a secretary of Uganda Law Society, if I'm not mistaken. And he served very well with a distinction in that position. When you read the memoirs here, the records, you discover that Njuba not only represented ordinary citizens, but he defended the colleagues in the legal profession because they faced threats, occupational hazards, and many of them suffered the brunt of the state excesses. Many of them, many lawyers. He records some of the names, like Protazia Igihugu. He talks about Kara Henry. Many of you know Mpungu. You know Joash Sendege, Pius Kawere, and many, many others who suffered the brunt of the regime excesses that time. But he never abdicated his duty of defending his colleagues who suffered at the hands of the regime. As a leader, and he mobilized his colleagues to always stand firm. And he paid a heavy price in defending victims of injustices. He recounts quite a lot. You read chapter 5 and 6. He tells a lot about what they went through. He recounts those horrible days. But I will speak out one instance, one incident, which happened to him, and it stands out in most of, in his records here. He was following up a case at Uganda Road as a lawyer, and there were instructions from Kasim Obura, the one who headed the notorious Naguru our public safety unit, the most dreaded one at that time, Naguru there, where many lawyers were detained. So he recounts, he writes here that when he went to find out what had happened to the person who had been arrested on just a simple charge of theft, he reached Uganda Road, and when he met the clerk had to call someone somewhere whom at that time he didn't know. So he called, and then the response from that side was that who is that person daring to follow up that matter? Then he was given the headset to talk to the gentleman who had called, and then the answer was, please, why are you following up that matter? Where do you get the guts to take that step? He explained he was a lawyer pursuing a matter. Then all of a sudden the phone hung up. No, he said, let me talk to that gentleman, the clerk. After that communication between the clerk and the person on the other side, on the other end of the call, the orders were that you are under arrest. He said, what? You are under arrest. Crime following up a case of a client. So he happened to be in the company of the relative of the suspect. The first person to take off was the relative of the suspect. He fled the scene very fast. Then Njuba remained there. He was picked and he dragged to the to the public safety unit in Naguru. What happened? You needed to read it. The kind of humiliation, actually not only humiliation, the dehumanization he was subjected to. The beating, the torture, what he went through just because he was defending somebody and was executing his duties as a legal practitioner. But he never recoiled from duty. He stood firm. And what happened subsequently, because he found there Kassim Obura. Many of you have read about Kassim Obura. You know what he did. And the Ali Towel. Those ones, they were real brutes. So, Njuba defended many of these people. Njuba stood firm and defended his colleagues, and also never recoiled from duty. The call I make to you, members of the New Radical Bar, they are lessons to pick from Njuba's experience, and many of his contemporaries who suffered at the hands of the regime in defense of human rights, in defense of justice, in defense of rule of law. So you must rise to the occasion. Today, the situation calls for legal activism. Mr. President, Uganda Law Society, you owe us no apology to adopt that stance of legal activism. You should do it. And many of us picked a cue from Njuba's experience and we have pursued that line. And there are lots of things that we have achieved out of that. Actually, new phenomena have actually been introduced into our jurisprudence. It defeats now logic that the gains were registered through legal activism, the Attorney General, they are being washed down the drain. So as I conclude on that particular point, there is a message for you, the Attorney General. And it is an excerpt from here, because now we are recounting the life of Njuba. And I want to read this about the lawyers who were arrested. This excerpt will pass on a message to you, the Attorney General. It's on page 85 of this book, the last paragraph about the arrest of lawyers. As fate would have it, Ayigihugu became a very active defense lawyer. In so doing, he created many enemies in the regime. It was then his turn to be arrested and was detained at Naguru. No effort was spared in contacting all persons close to Amin, but that notwithstanding, he remained in detention. That is Aiguhugu. Ayume, you know him, Francis Ayume, worked very hard in presenting his case to Amin directly sometimes, or through other cabinet members to whom he had access. It was becoming impossible as weeks turned into months. Something had to be done in order to save his life. No one could individually handle it. We therefore decided on a collective effort to meet Amin at a social function. The Attorney General, why I'm passing on this message to you, the Attorney General, that time was Godfrey Rule, largely through Francis Ayume, managed to get him to accept the invite to the meeting at which lawyers presented their grievances. One of the grievances on the agenda was Aiguhugu's case. The magistrate read their petition. The lawyers too had their petition read by Joseph Mlenga. At the end of the petition, Idi Amin responded, "Who is this man?" he inquired. Isn't he that lawyer whose release I ordered a long time ago?" We were all astonished. I sneaked out to the director's office. The meeting was at the Law Development Center, and rang Aiguhugu's house. And sure enough, he was at home. What actually happened was, when Idi Amin learned his case was likely to come up at the meeting, he quietly ordered his release before coming to the meeting. Idi Amin outsmarted all of us. The issue ended there and then. We all appreciated Ayume's efforts, both public and private. Why I am getting that excerpt from this? The Attorney General played a central role in the release of Aiguhugu. Our president is a fugitive, is in exile. What is the role of the Attorney General in his coming back here? The coming back, we want to hear it from you. I mean, he was a brute. I mean, he was a dictator. I mean, he was a murderer. But the Attorney General that time stood up and said, no, one of our own, Aiguhugu, must be released. Mr. Attorney General. The Honorable Sivambi said we are orphans. Yesterday we had the General Assembly. The President addressed us almost with tears coming out of his eye. He showed that his baby, who is less than 1 year old, the baby is also in exile. We are in a quagmire right now. We can't hold elections because of multiple litigations and whatnot. We are in a total mess as the legal profession, as the bar. At one time, there was even an attempted coup by one Munaba, the Secretary General. And I'm surprised when you get the Secretary, you read about Njuba, he was Secretary of Uganda Law Society. He was defending lawyers. He was not overthrowing his colleagues who were leading the bar. But you have a Munaba who turns the gun against the President of Uganda Law Society, who has a boot on his head. So we want to see the role of the Attorney General. I want to see the Honorable Attorney General Chiwanuka playing the role of Godfrey Rule of the Idi Amin days in releasing Aiguhugu, and you are causing the return of our President so that we continue with the leadership. Now, the second last is about judicial activism. Njuba, they have mentioned here, the Honorable Kikiri here, when he served as Chief Magistrate. Njuba was approached by Idi Amin because there was a vacuum after the expulsion of the Asians. He writes in this book, many of the magistrates were Ugandans of Indian origin. So when they were expelled, there was a vacuum. So they approached many lawyers to serve on temporary contract. That's how he served on a 6-month contract. Many of them accepted. So Njuba, even when he served as a magistrate, he remained an activist. He espoused and actually executed judicial activism. There are so many instances I don't have time to recount. Read the book. People buy the book. If you can't buy the one of 100,000, at least the one of 50,000. Get this book and read it. You'll understand Njuba the man. So Njuba and his friend who had been appointed on contract He's called Mbazira Emmanuel. They were in a terrible situation on how to rescue people who are suffering injustice. He tells a story which is quite harrowing. That at one moment, they were in chambers with his friend. Now they bring a man, he's called Dungu. Dungu was charged with a simple case again of theft by the notorious Kassim Obura of the public safety unit in Naguru. So when he comes in the dock, they realized he was going to be released. So Kassim Obura and his team decided to withdraw the case. So when they withdrew the case, Dungu, who was in the dock, pleaded with the magistrate, please don't release me, remand me, I'm going to be killed. But now, Njuba and his friend, his colleague, realized they had no ground to remand him because the charges had been withdrawn. So they decided to tell him, please, you have been discharged. He said, no, I'm not going anywhere. Please remand me. They found in themselves that predicament and said, how do we handle this? So they conferred and said, now, let's leave this man. So when they went to the chambers to find the solution, the man came running to them in the chambers. Meanwhile, those vicious men were already in the courtroom running after the man. So what they did in Juba and in Bazira, they opened the window of Uganda Road, the same building, it has not changed. They opened the window and told the man, run, to flee. That is judicial activism. The man ran, they followed him up, blah, blah, blah. The lawyer, Sebunya, was arrested and taken to Naguru. So as these people ran after the man, as fate would have it, they finally got him, loaded him onto the truck. As they were about to reach Naguru, they shot him dead. Several bullets, shot him dead. But good enough, Sebunya, his lawyer, had been taken in at Naguru, and he was watching each and everything. So he's the one who testified in the case of Kassim Obura, and Kassim Obura was convicted, executed. But before his execution, he talked about Njuba's arrest during UNRF. Njuba found himself in the same cell with Kassim Obura, but Kassim Obura was executed. Now, why am I bringing this story which was told to us by Njuba in this book? You can see the magistrates, Njuba, Mbazira, and others fighting to rescue victims of injustice, doing everything possible to ensure that they save lives. That is judicial activism. Now I'm wondering, my Lord, I'm sorry to raise this. This is one thing that has baffled me. Through judicial activism, there are quite a lot of innovations that we have made in our jurisprudence, like a mandatory, you heard of mandatory injunction, something which was alien. How can an injunction be mandatory? We have things like statutory interdicts. We have things like amendment of the Constitution by infection. All those innovative doctrines have found their way into our jurisprudence. But there is one which was quite innovative by Justice Ogora, interim bail. Very, very interesting. We could read into the law, there was nothing like interim bail. But out of his ingenuity, he came up with that doctrine and granted Dr. Chiza Besigye bail. That was judicial activism. Now, all of a sudden, 20 years down later, because initially that was 2006 when Besigye got interim bail. 20 years down the road, we are reversing those gains. Besigye, who got interim bail in 2006, cannot get mandatory bail, which is fundamentally provided for in the Constitution.